I never thought the person I trusted most would betray me, but life has a way of flipping expectations. My best friend and I shared everything: dreams, struggles, and plans for the future. Our bond seemed unbreakable, and we had promised to support each other no matter what. The turning point came when a prestigious job opportunity arose, a role both of us desperately wanted. We agreed that no matter who got it, our friendship would remain intact. No competition, we said, smiling as if nothing could come between us. But deep down, I had no idea she was planning to cross a line I didn't think she was capable of. As I prepared for the interview, I worked tirelessly refining my resume, researching the company, and rehearsing potential answers. She seemed supportive, always asking how I was preparing and even sharing tips. Trusting her completely, I shared my strategies, including the unique ideas I planned to highlight in my interview. The day of the interview arrived, and I walked in confident and ready. To my surprise, I saw her in the waiting room. She looked unusually composed, and something about her demeanor felt off. I brushed it aside, believing our friendship was solid. I gave it my best shot and left feeling optimistic. When the results came in, my heart sank. She got the job. I congratulated her, trying to suppress my disappointment. But as time went on, the truth began to unravel. I overheard colleagues discussing her ideas that sounded eerily similar to what I had shared with her. Betrayal settled deep in my chest, but I kept quiet, convincing myself I might be overthinking. She avoided me after that, skipping our usual hangouts and offering vague excuses. The friendship we once cherished started to crumble. Meanwhile, I was left to pick up the pieces and start over. It wasn't easy, but I kept going. Then, fortune smiled on me. I landed an even better job at a rival company, this time as a manager. I threw myself into the role, determined to succeed without shortcuts or betrayal. Little did I know, fate had one more surprise in store for me. On my first day as manager, I walked into the office and froze. Sitting at one of the desks was my former best friend, now one of my subordinates. The look on her face when she saw me said it all: shock, dread, and a hint of regret. The dynamics shifted, but I remained professional. I treated her like any other team member, refusing to let personal history interfere with work. But the cracks in her performance quickly showed. She struggled with deadlines, made careless mistakes, and lacked the confidence she once displayed. The charm she used to climb the ladder was failing her. One day, after a particularly disastrous presentation, I called her into my office. She sat across from me, avoiding eye contact, and I could see the weight of her mistakes catching up with her. "You are struggling," I said bluntly. "What's going on?" She hesitated, then mumbled something about adjusting to the workload. But I knew the truth: she had taken the position without truly understanding the responsibility it required. I decided to give her a choice: either step up or step aside. It was a chance to prove she deserved to be there, but the effort had to come from her. To my surprise, she agreed, promising to do better. For a while, she tried, but the guilt of her actions and the pressure of her own incompetence weighed heavily. Months later, during a team review, her shortcomings became undeniable. However, instead of firing her, I offered her constructive feedback, encouraging her to grow. Surprisingly, she admitted her mistakes, including the betrayal that cost us our friendship. "I am sorry," she said, tears in her eyes. "I shouldn't have done what I did." Her apology was long overdue, but instead of focusing on revenge, I chose to focus on my growth. Holding on to resentment would have only held me back. Over time, she worked to rebuild her reputation, and though things between us would never return to what they once were, I respected her efforts. Eventually, she transferred to another department for a fresh start, and I continued leading my team to success. In the end, I learned that true success isn't about revenge, it's about thriving despite the odds. Betrayal taught me resilience, and the experience shaped me into a leader I could be proud of. As for her, I hope she learned that shortcuts and deceit can never replace hard work and integrity. Months had passed since she transferred to another department, and life at work had finally settled into a steady rhythm. My team was thriving, deadlines were being met, and I was finally feeling like I had found my place. But despite all the progress, a small part of me couldn't shake the lingering thoughts of our past, of how it all began and how it ended. Then, out of the blue, I received an email from her. She wanted to meet for coffee, saying she needed to talk. At first, I wasn't sure if I wanted to revisit that chapter of my life, but curiosity got the best of me, and I agreed. Sitting across from her in the same cafe where we once planned our futures, she looked different, less confident, more subdued. There was an awkward silence before she finally spoke, admitting that she owed me a real apology. She confessed how she had believed getting ahead at any cost would make her happy, but instead it left her feeling empty and unprepared for the reality of success. I listened, surprised by her honesty, and though part of me wanted to stay guarded, I realized I had already moved on from the resentment. When she mentioned leaving the company to start fresh, I told her that running away wouldn't solve anything. She needed to own her mistakes and prove she could rise above them. She looked at me with a mixture of surprise and relief, as if she hadn't expected encouragement from me. From that day forward, I noticed a change in her. She took her work more seriously, put in the effort, and slowly earned back some respect from the team. Though things between us would never be the same, there was an unspoken understanding that the past no longer defined us. One day, as I was leaving the office, I found a small note on my desk that simply read, "Thank you for not giving up on me. I won't waste this chance." A small smile crossed my face, and in that moment, I realized that closure doesn't always come with grand gestures. Sometimes, it's in knowing you've grown beyond the pain and become stronger because of it. Whether she ultimately succeeded or not was no longer my concern. I had finally moved on, and that was enough. Time moved on, and so did I. My career continued to flourish, and I poured my energy into leading my team to greater heights. Promotions, recognition, and new opportunities kept me busy, and for the most part, I rarely thought about my former best friend. But life has a funny way of bringing people back when you least expect it. A year after our last conversation, I received an invitation to an industry conference and event, filled with top executives and professionals from rival companies. It was a chance to network, learn, and showcase our company's progress. Little did I know, she would be there too. As I stepped into the grand hall filled with polished professionals and towering banners, I spotted her across the room. She was engaged in a conversation with a group of executives, her posture more confident than I remembered. Something about her presence was different, not the fake bravado she once had, but a quiet determination that intrigued me. She caught my eye and, for a brief moment, hesitation flickered across her face before she gave me a small nod of acknowledgement. It wasn't the awkward, guilt-ridden encounter I had once expected. It felt neutral. Throughout the day, our paths crossed multiple times. Whether it was during breakout sessions or networking lunches, it became clear that she had worked hard to rebuild herself. I overheard snippets of her discussions, thoughtful insights, strong proposals, and a level of professionalism I had never seen from her before. It was strange, seeing her as an equal rather than someone from my past who had wronged me, and for the first time, I felt genuinely happy for her progress. Eventually, we found ourselves in the same discussion panel, representing our respective companies. As we exchanged ideas and insights in front of an audience, I couldn't help but acknowledge how much she had grown. She spoke with confidence, and her contributions were well received. After the panel ended, we found ourselves standing next to each other by the refreshment table. She smiled, a genuine one this time, and said, "You did great up there." I smiled back, "So did you." There was a pause before she continued, "I wanted to thank you again, for everything. I didn't realize how much I needed to fail in order to learn what success actually means." I nodded, finally feeling at peace with everything that had happened. "We all learn our lessons in different ways," I replied. "I am glad you found your way." The conversation was brief but meaningful. It wasn't about apologies or rehashing the past. It was two professionals acknowledging each other's journeys. We weren't friends anymore, but we had become something else, former rivals who had grown from the experience. As the conference wrapped up, I realized that life had a way of teaching us things we never expect. The betrayal that once felt like a deep wound had transformed into a stepping stone for both of us. She had found her own path, and I had found mine. And as I walked away, I felt lighter than I had in years. In the end, success wasn't about proving her wrong, it was about proving to myself that I could rise above the past and build a future on my own terms. And that, I realized, was the most satisfying victory of all. Months passed after the conference, and life continued to unfold in ways I hadn't anticipated. My career trajectory remained on an upward climb, with new projects, bigger responsibilities, and a growing sense of fulfillment. I had finally moved past the shadow of betrayal, focusing entirely on my own growth and the future I had built. But just when I thought that chapter of my life was completely behind me, life decided to test me once more. One morning, I walked into the office to find an email waiting in my inbox, an internal memo announcing a strategic partnership with another firm. And guess who was leading their team? Her. Seeing her name attached to such a high-profile project sent a mix of emotions swirling inside me. Would old tensions resurface? Could we work together without the baggage of our past weighing us down? When we met for the first joint meeting, she walked in with an air of confidence that felt earned, not borrowed. Gone was the person who once relied on shortcuts and stolen ideas. Instead, she presented well-thought-out strategies and approached the collaboration with professionalism. Sitting across the conference table from her, I couldn't help but admire the transformation, though a small part of me remained cautious. Throughout the project, we worked side by side, exchanging ideas and problem-solving without the awkwardness I had once expected. We were no longer competitors, just two professionals with a shared goal. She respected my leadership, and I could see that she had learned to carry her own weight without relying on anyone else. Surprisingly, I even caught myself enjoying our brainstorming sessions, appreciating her fresh perspectives and insights. One evening, after a long day of meetings, we found ourselves alone in the office, tying up loose ends before an important presentation. She glanced at me and said, "You know, I never really apologized properly for everything." I looked up from my screen, meeting her eyes. "You already did," I replied calmly. "And honestly, I think we've both moved past it." She nodded, a hint of relief in her smile. "I have, but I still regret how things happened between us. I was so caught up in getting ahead that I didn't realize what I was losing in the process." I sighed, leaning back in my chair. "We were young and ambitious. Mistakes happen. What matters is that we've grown from them." A comfortable silence settled between us before she spoke again. "I really respect how far you've come. You deserve everything you've achieved." Hearing those words felt like the closure I didn't realize I still needed. I smiled, genuinely this time. "Thanks, and you've come a long way too." As we wrapped up for the night, I realized something important. There was no bitterness left, no lingering resentment. The hurt and betrayal that once consumed me had been replaced with acceptance and growth. We weren't best friends anymore, but we were no longer enemies either. We were simply two individuals who had taken different paths but ultimately found our own versions of success. The project turned out to be a massive success, earning praise from executives on both sides. As we stood side by side at the final presentation, I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride, not just for myself, but for both of us. We had come full circle, and this time, it was built on mutual respect and hard-earned growth. As I walked out of the building that evening, I felt lighter than I had in years. Some chapters in life don't end with revenge or dramatic confrontations. Sometimes, they end with understanding, forgiveness, and moving forward without looking back. And in that moment, I knew I had truly won. As time went on, our professional paths continued to cross, but now, it felt natural, almost as if the tension that once defined our relationship had never existed. The success of our joint project had not only strengthened our company's partnership but had also proven that we were capable of working together without the weight of the past clouding our judgment. One afternoon, I found myself reflecting on everything that had happened over the years. From the initial betrayal to standing side by side as equals, it was a journey neither of us could have predicted. Growth had been our greatest lesson, and despite the wounds we once inflicted on each other, we had both emerged stronger. I realized that forgiveness wasn't just about letting go of the past, it was about embracing the future without bitterness holding me back. Then came the unexpected news. I was offered a major promotion that would take me to a new city, leading a larger team and overseeing operations on a global scale. It was everything I had worked for, and yet, a part of me hesitated. Leaving meant closing this chapter of my life completely, stepping away from the journey that had shaped me in so many ways. But deep down, I knew it was time. When word of my promotion spread through the office, congratulations poured in, but the one that surprised me the most was from her. She knocked on my office door one evening, stepping in with a hesitant smile. "So, I hear you are moving up again," she said with a small laugh. I chuckled. "Yeah, I guess I am. Big changes ahead." She nodded, her expression more thoughtful than I expected. "I just wanted to say, I am really happy for you. You deserve this." "Thank you," I said sincerely. "And you? What's next for you?" She shrugged. "I am still figuring it out, but, honestly, I think I am finally on the right track." There was a pause before she added, "I wouldn't have gotten here without you, without everything that happened." I smiled, feeling a sense of closure settle over me. We both learned a lot, and I am glad we can look back without regrets. She nodded, and for the first time in years, it felt like we had finally reached a place of mutual respect and understanding. There were no more grudges, no lingering resentments, just two people who had once been friends, taken different paths, and found their way in the end. On my last day at the office, as I packed up my things, I found a small envelope on my desk. Inside was a simple note. "Thank you for everything. Wishing you all the success in the world, no shortcuts this time." I couldn't help but smile. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't a plea for forgiveness. It was a quiet acknowledgement of how far we had come, and in a way, that meant more than anything else. As I walked out of the building one last time, I felt nothing but gratitude. Gratitude for the lessons, the growth, and the journey that had shaped me into the person I had become. I realized that success was never about proving myself to others, but about staying true to who I was when others didn't. And as I stepped into my new future, I knew one thing for sure: the past no longer defined me. I had built something far greater: strength, resilience, and a future that was entirely my own. Settling into my new role in a different city was both exhilarating and challenging. The responsibilities were greater, the stakes were higher, and I was surrounded by some of the most talented professionals in the industry. It felt like a fresh start that I had earned through years of perseverance, growth, and resilience. Yet, despite the excitement, there were moments of reflection when I couldn't help but think back to where it all started. The journey that brought me here wasn't just about career growth, it was about self-discovery and learning to let go. Months into my new position, I was thriving. My team respected me, our projects were receiving recognition, and I was finally feeling at peace with where life had taken me. Then, one evening, I received a message that made me pause. It was from her. "Hey, I know it's been a while. I wanted to share some news. I just got promoted to lead a new division. It's been tough, but I finally feel like I am where I am meant to be. Thought you'd want to know. Hope you are doing well." I stared at the message for a while, unsure how to respond. A part of me felt proud of the fact that she had finally found her own path, without shortcuts, without relying on anyone else. Another part of me wondered if this message was her way of seeking validation, or just wanting to share something with someone who understood her journey. After a moment, I replied simply, "That's amazing. Congratulations. I always knew you had it in you." Her response was immediate. "Thanks. And thanks for everything. I mean it." Reading those words, I realized how much we had both changed. No longer were we the same people who once saw success as a competition, who let ambition cloud our judgment. There was a quiet acknowledgement that we had both found our way, and we didn't need to hold on to the past anymore. As weeks passed, life continued to unfold in unexpected ways. My role brought opportunities to travel, to network with influential people, and to contribute to larger, more meaningful projects. Success felt different. It wasn't about proving anything to anyone anymore. It was about making a real impact. One day, while attending an industry event, I found myself in a room filled with executives, discussing innovation and leadership. As I spoke about my experiences and lessons learned, I realized that every setback, every betrayal, and every struggle had contributed to the person I had become. I wasn't just leading a team, I was leading with integrity, something that no amount of ambition could replace. Towards the end of the event, I spotted her in the crowd. Our eyes met briefly, and she offered a nod of acknowledgement. We didn't need words there was an understanding, a mutual respect that no longer needed validation. Walking away from that moment, I felt lighter than ever before. Life had come full circle, and I knew that some people are meant to be in your life for a season, to teach you lessons you never knew you needed. And sometimes, the best growth comes from the hardest experiences. As I continued forward, one thing was clear: I no longer defined my success by past betrayals or victories over others. My success was mine alone, built with perseverance, hard work, and the strength to move on. And that, I realized, was the greatest achievement of all.